So if you look at Microsoft 365, which is basically the component offering us Exchange and email and security, then Microsoft 365, there's a couple of things that we need to take into account when Microsoft designed the whole thing. First of all, for the end users, we want to make sure that users can work with a modern workplace. That is, to the modern workplace means that users should be able to work anytime, anywhere, and what is also quite important, on any device. Users should be able to be productive in how they do their jobs. They need to be able to be creative in how to be the jobs, and also important, they need to be able to work in a secure environment. Other than that, Microsoft also defines the modern workplace to be inclusive, meaning that, if you have any disability, you should still be able to do your work. A peace of mind. This is a peace of mind means that we should not be stressed because of our jobs, right? No burnouts, please. And we need to be able to do our work in a compliant way, right? So this is pretty much what the modern workplace is about. Now, if we think about the modern workplace, I mean, if we think about security, then, whoa, sometimes my zooming happens accidentally. Then what we see is that that basically these three factors, any device, uh, security, and compliance, are pretty much the most important ones. Now, when we think about security, so if we would be looking into, going through a security thing in Microsoft 365, then Microsoft has a couple of components a couple of models or a couple of thoughts that they want to build everything they build with. One of them is that Microsoft follows the zero trust model. The zero trust model, if you look at that, then what we do is we need to, for example, verify everything explicitly, meaning that everything that anybody does needs to be checked whether or not this is allowed. It needs to be authorized, right? That's are we allowed to do stuff? That is authorization. Also, we need to make sure that we monitor what people do as well. So we create audit logs, and we are always able to sort of look back in who did what at what time, from where, and everything. Then also we need to make sure that we follow the principle of least privilege, meaning that we only want users, but also admins, to be able to do what they need to do in their job and nothing more. And even better, also only when they need to do it. So, for example, you could have the Exchange administrator permissions. And if you have those Exchange administrator permissions, then you should only have them when you need them, when you want to do something in Exchange. So that is something you could also implement. So that means just enough access, just in time access. Also, we need to assume a breach, meaning that we need to assume, I think it's with one S, but I'm not sure. If we need to assume that hackers are going to be successful in attacking us. Because if we assume that, then we can start thinking about solutions to about, if that happens, we want to, reduce, or we want to limit what the blast radius in the end could be. So if somebody attacks you and they are successful, then what they can do and where they can move within your network when successful should be as limited as possible. So basically the response to assuming breach is that we are going to segmentize the environment, create smaller bits that are sort of unrelated to each other. That is the zero trust model. And one other thing that we want to be looking into when we think about security in Microsoft is that we need to implement the defense in depth model. In the defense in depth model, we basically go and we want to be, basically what we want to do is we want to secure every layer in a situation. And now the situation when it comes to Exchange Online, so the situation in Exchange Online is that, for example, if we would take the entire, if we take the entire chain between, from one end, the user, this is going to be the user here. So from one end, we have a user, and all the way in the other end is the data that users work with. And if we think about Exchange, then we think about mailboxes, right? So we think about the user's mailbox. And everything in between should be protected. And we need to think about security in all those different layers. And if we look at, for example, if we look at this, if we would have to sort of create those layers when it comes to Exchange, then in just thinking out of the top of my head here, if I want to access my mailbox, I need first of all, I need to have a device. And this device could either be a full computer running, for example, Windows or Mac OS or Linux. Or I could be using some kind of a mobile device, iOS or Android devices that we use to access the mailbox. Now, my device itself is not good enough. This device also is going to run, well, the device is represented to us by an operating system, obviously. And on top of these operating systems, we are making use of the client applications. So we have a client app that requires us to get the actual connection to that mailbox. Now, for us, if we in order to sort of in order to connect to Exchange Online, then one of the things that we have is, of course, the client app is going to connect via the this is supposed, well, okay, this maybe I want to make it look good, so this is supposed to look like a cloud. Here we go. Here, it's not too bad, is it? I practiced this a lot. Yeah. So the thing is, every time I say, every time I make this drawing, I think about a croissant. Because one time I was teaching this class in Paris. There's this one guy that said, "Hey, it looks like a croissant." I said, "No, it doesn't look like a croissant." But he said, "Yeah, it does." So now I think about the croissant. So it makes sense, right? It's so now I practice. So this is we connect. So the client app connects to the internet. On the other side of the internet, that is where this is where we are, right? Say, on the other side of the internet, we are sort of entering, let's say we are entering we are entering the Microsoft Azure environment. This is so basically what we are entering here is something called a service boundary. And the service boundary, or in Azure, this is also very often referred to as the tenant, your Microsoft 365 or Azure tenant, or which is also very often referred to as the security boundary. So when we go in and when we connect to Exchange as a user, then well, I am entering the environment in my tenant in Azure. And well, if we are entering this, then, for example, from the user's perspective, we are connecting to an Exchange server. This is the so we are going to connect into the Exchange Online client access service component, right? Now we all know Exchange from when we were managing Exchange on premise, and we had these servers with client access services and mailbox services and hub transport services and so on. And here we are accessing the Exchange Online client access service component, right? However, before we get to access this, and now I'm gonna sort of make it go away, because in order for us to make this connection, we are going to enter the tenant. And when we enter the tenant, we have to deal with Azure Active Directory, or well, nowadays referred to as Entra ID, right? Whoops, Entra ID. So this is Entra ID, and the role that Entra ID has is to serve and protect cloud applications. That is the role of Entra ID, meaning that Entra ID is here to allow users to sign in, to help authenticate identities, to sign in into, well, applications that we are protecting using the Entra ID. So, for example, if I would quickly go, let's quickly go into my Entra portal, so entra.microsoft.com. You may have seen this portal before. Because you're all old, I will zoom in a little bit. But this, so if you look at this environment, then we do user management here, right? So we have the users in the organization. We have group memberships. We have devices that we can work with, and we have applications here. And this list of enterprise applications, this is the applications that this Entra ID in my tenant is protecting. So what we see is a lot of applications. If I would search for an application, I can search, for example, for Exchange. I don't see it. But if I remove my filter, then all of a sudden there's a default filter that only shows, let's say, manageable apps. And here we see that I actually do have quite a couple of Exchange related components. And one of them is Exchange Office 365, Exchange Online, Outlook service for Exchange. There are some other components like Microsoft Exchange Online Protection that we are. Role-based access control is here. Microsoft Information Protection, which is about protecting your data. So what we see is we see actually quite a few Exchange related components that we need Entra ID for to sign in there. So if, for example, a user wants to sign in into anything that is connected to Entra ID, we need to sign in first. And when we sign in first, there's a couple of things that are happening. And one of the, so if we need to sign in into Entra ID, there is actually two things that are happening sort of simultaneously. One thing that happens first is we are making use of a sign-in app, login.microsoft online. I'm shortening this, by the way, login.microsoftonline.com, right? So that is the sign-in application. And this application is here for primarily for handling the authentication bits. So this is where we are doing, well, where we are verifying that this identity is indeed that identity. So this is also where we are going to configure multi-factor authentication, right? That's what we need. And we have a second component here, and that is a conditional, oh, I need to type this better, a conditional access. Okay, this sucks. Okay, let's go and put it like this here. Conditional access policies. And this is quite nice because this allows us to be more flexible in whether or not we want to allow people to sign in case of a specific situation. So, for example, if a user is not in Europe, we might want to block access. Or if the user is using an outdated operating system, like like iOS 8 or something, or Android, I don't know what versions they have, like Android 5, or Windows 98. Then we could choose to block this kind of access, right? That is basically what we want. So that is conditional access. And you have to go through this. And then as a user, you are going to be allowed to connect to, you're going to be allowed to connect to the Exchange Online. And in this example, it's mostly about the client access services, the Basically, nowadays, and ever since a long time, this is only supporting HTTP traffic nowadays. So even your traditional Outlook client, which was used to be using MAPI, is now MAPI over HTTP. So basically, it's all captured in HTTP traffic. So that's what we see. And then basically, if we do have access to our mailbox, then we have access. Oh, sorry, if we do have access to client access services to our mailbox, that is where the data goes. So in the mailbox, this is where your email data is located. So if we think about defense in depth, we are thinking about securing all of those layers. And this is the layers we are securing from the perspective of a user connecting to its mailbox. So if we want to secure everything, then we need to secure this user's identity, right? We need to think about, hey, this user should not be hacked. So we want to be thinking about multi-factor authentication and the ways that we do this. We want to be thinking about, we also want to be thinking about, uh, um, for example, identity protection, where we could, for example, monitor the way that we are monitor the way that we are signing in, and if we sign in weird ways, then we might want to block it as well. Hey, maybe I use a Mac OS device all the time. If I start using a Linux machine, that's weird, right? I sign in from pretty much everywhere, so I'm not being blocked based on my location. But if I would be a stationary user, and I would all of a sudden go to Venice and then start signing in, that might be weird, right? So identity protection is, for example, a solution you might want to be thinking of. Now, also the devices are important, because if I install my Outlook client on my iPad or on my Android tablet or on my Mac or my Windows machine, I do have a copy of organizational data on that device, so I want to protect that device. I want to be implementing policies like BitLocker drive encryption, or for macOS we have something called File Vault. When it comes to, so that is something we want to be protecting. How do we sign in into the device itself? Is there a password here, or is there a PIN code, or do we want to use Enter ID? Then there's the client app, because the client app also needs to be protected. So, for example, we need to think about application protection policies. I have a policy that if I wanna, I'm not sure where my phone is. Oh, in my pocket. So if I have a policy, this if I want to access my mailbox, and I open on my phone Outlook, I am being asked for an extra PIN code. Even if my phone would be unlocked in this room and you would find it and you would try to open Outlook to access my email, you will still have to enter my PIN code. So you would have to guess my birthday, and then you think about, right, and that is how you do that. So that's the PIN code. So client application protection. Then, well, the internet itself, we don't really need to think about this too much, because, well, Microsoft is going to make sure that everything happens with HTTPS, so the certificate thing is in place, right? But when we think about the actual sign-in, then, well, the authentication bit is important. So how are we authenticating? Multi-factor, hopefully. What kind of multi-factor are we forcing? And in conditional access, we're going to even add more rules to the sign-in. Then at the CAS level, we still have, like we always have had in Exchange, those mailbox access policies. Like, so what is, for example, Outlook for the web? What does it allow you to do, or what kind of capabilities will your Active Sync client have? Like that. So we still have those policies, and then we have the data inside the mailbox, and we also need to protect that. For example, what if in this mailbox we are storing all kinds of sensitive information, like information related to, I don't know, healthcare, information related to financial services, other kinds of legal services, and is it important for us to protect this kind of data in a different way? And that is where, for example, Microsoft Perview comes in, where we can set up data classification, where we can set up this with policies, where we can implement data lifecycle management. So users are not allowed to, for example, delete certain data within 7 years because law or industry dictates that you are not allowed to delete that data. What about, so this is just when the data is in the mailbox. And then this is the part where we can only think about access to the mailbox. The second bit, that we also need to think about, if we think about security for exchange, we need to think about email being delivered to us, right? So what if we are receiving or sending emails? Is there anything there? And obviously there is. So for example, if we have, let's say I'm gonna try and well, this red user, this is a red user, and this red user is someone that is, let's say, not in my organization, right? So let's say this is an external user. They can start thinking about sending emails to us. So what they have is they use they have an external email server. So they have some kind of an SMTP server. Any kind is fine. So they are now going to create an email. So they connect to the SMTP server. This is the email that they are creating. So this has to look like a very weird envelope, but it's envelope. And in the envelope we have the actual content of the email. Let's say we all know that email has a header and content and a body. So that is what we get. Then this email needs to be delivered to us. So there's a couple of different things that are part of this solution. At the internet layer, let's say in the internet layer, we have our public DNS. This is our public DNS, which will help the sending server to find, first of all, it will have to find my mail server. So we use Dynamics record for this. But we also, if this sender is a spam asshole, a spasshole, I think, then we also need about, some kind of components that will help us to fight spam thingies. SPF records, DKIM records, DMARC, DMARC records. So we need to do these kinds of anti-spam solutions. Now, we could configure this in Microsoft 365, but it's also basically already done for us, right? We do have a couple of options for that, but we'll look at it. So that is one thing that we're going to see at this point. And then we have the receiving end of the thing, right? So when receiving emails, we have the component that is, let's say, we have actually quite a couple of components. One of them is the first one that you will connect to is something called Exchange Online Protection. Exchange Online Protection is here to implement, let's say, basic anti-spam and basic anti-malware solutions that we are implementing. So typically, if the MX record, this MX record will basically tell us to go to this Exchange Online Protection component. And any mailbox in Microsoft 365 is protected with this functionality. It's not optional. It's there. Your Exchange Online Protection will handle the first spam stuff and the first malware stuff. Now, depending on your license, there is also a very important component that is added into this, the mix, and that is something that we shorten to MDO. I know I do use a lot of acronyms. So if you get a little bit overwhelmed by acronyms, my MOAP website is also the location, which is obviously super fast, as you can see. You never have to wait. I know that yeah, it took the thing is that the in this building the network security dude is very, very protective of his network traffic. So everything that I connect to, every website, it's sort of first let's get checked and see if it's what kind of content we see, and then we are going to allow connection. But here in the here, yes, it's good. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's good stuff. No, that's that's true. So we have the in the learning part here, which is again also super fast, as you can see. The first link in learning is a list of acronyms that I use a lot. So here I can see acronyms by Microsoft. If I open this one, then you'll see that I have a list of acronyms that I very often use. Yeah. I know, and I try to keep it as up to date as possible because Microsoft every now and then they also change names and such. Therefore it sometimes takes a little while. But here we are. So here we have most of the acronyms that I use are here. If there is anyone missing, then please let me know. I'll just update it. But that is about the acronyms. So what we see is we have Microsoft Defender for Office, which comes, by the way, in two plans. There's a Microsoft Defender for Office Plan 1 and a Microsoft Defender for Office Plan 2. Based on the plan, you have more or less functionality, of course. But basically, what it always does is it comes with an extra couple of security features. One of them being save links. Um, Now, the idea behind this is if we receive an email that contains a link, we can check what is behind the link. And then if that link points to a file that we don't trust, then we could disallow the email to go through. However, if you are a smart hacker, if I want you to click on a link, I know that you are using some kind of a technique that will follow the link first, right? So what I do is when I send the message, the link points towards something completely valid. And then obviously because I own what is behind the link, in an hour or so, or maybe in 15 minutes, because then all the checking has been done, then I change the backend of what that link points to. And then I change that to something really bad, of course, right? That is what I want. Now, another thing that SafeLinks does, which is kind of cool, is that it will also sort of check on detonation. So if the user is in Outlook and the user clicks on the link, we will be sent into some sort of a proxy server that will go ahead of you, check what is behind the link now. If it's still okay, then I'm gonna go and tell the user, yes, you can go and go through. But if the thing behind the link has changed to something bad, we can disallow access for the user. We can go and say, hey, from now on, that's not allowed anymore. Right? It's interesting. So that is what Defender for Office brings as safe links. It does more because it also has a solution for safe attachments. With safe attachments, we are going to check the attachment, but not like a traditional anti-malware EOP, Exchange Online Protection, which is pretty much using a couple of different engines to check the malware. And what is that product called again that Microsoft acquired for this, or that Microsoft uses for this? Oh man, that's a long, long time ago. Microsoft, when it comes to the Exchange Online anti-malware solution, Microsoft actually used or acquired an organization that has a very specific 5 to 7 engine anti-malware solution. And if there's one of the engines that will find malware, you will not allow the email through. So not just one engine, but more. Um, Now that is just traditional anti-malware for email. But in Defender for Office, what we do is we take the attachment, we bring it to a completely separated sandbox kind of virtual machine. We execute the attachment, meaning that we are going to sort of open it up if it's a Word document or so, or a PDF, or if it's an Excel file, whatever kind of file, we try to open it up. Um, and then um, and then we will monitor if that attachment wants to do something weird, like access certain pieces of the memory or access the registry or try to access certain locations on the drive and everything. And if that is doing things that we don't like, we will not deliver the email to the user, right? Now, this is a time-consuming thing. So people that have this enabled on their mailboxes, they might feel that. So sometimes, "Hey, I sent you the email right now, okay," and then you have to wait like 5 minutes, which is weird for us. But this may happen, right? We do have options. We could go and say, "Hey, you know what? Why don't we deliver the email immediately? But we are not going to deliver the attachment immediately. We check it first and then we reattach it to the email later." Right? That is an extra opportunity that you may have. And in the time that the attachment has not yet been reattached, the user can still go and open the attachments, but only from a browser view. So it will never open something at the local machine, only in the protective area of that browser. And we have one other thing here, and that is we have a very enhanced anti-phishing engine, all based on machine learning and AI and fancy technologies that will prevent or that will protect users better from phishing emails. Domain spoofing, sender spoofing is something that could be that you can fight against like this. Other than that, Defender for Office has also one other extra thing which I really like, and that is that we can run something called attack simulations, where we can sort of test our users whether or not they are they are smart enough to recognize spam thingies. Attack simulations. There's all kinds of fancy. There's like a threat explorer here for us to work with. There is a threat reports that we can also check out and so on. So there's many different things we can look at when it comes to protecting the email. So and then once that is done, in Exchange Online, we also have this is where we have the hub transport component, right? And this is for the SMTP traffic, right? So what we see is that if an email, let's say, is being sent into Exchange Online protection. So, first of all, the mail server needs to connect to DNS in order to understand where to go with this email. Then we are going to see the email being delivered into that Exchange Online protection thing. We do the anti-spam and the anti-malware stuff here. If everything is all right, we're going to take it to Defender for Office and check out the links and the attachment and do the phishing thingy. And if everything is still all right, we can then bring the email to we can and actually if I want to make this look even better, then from here it is all again, let's say, internal kind of communication. So let's keep it in the blue like this. And once everything is all right, and here at the exchange level, we in the hub transport component, we still can work with those mail flow rules that we are already used to implement in Exchange on-prem as well, right? Mail flow rules, and then the mail is being delivered into the user's mailbox. For inbound mail, we have this. Then we have the emails here, and the emails may contain all kinds of information. So what we have next, we have one other component here, and that is that this other component that we're going to look at is a component that is called Microsoft Perview. And that might be new because this is something that has nothing to do with everything you ever seen in Exchange on-prem. In Exchange on-prem, you will just see the mail rules, right? And you may know one bit about this, and that is data loss prevention policies. Data loss prevention policies. So data loss prevention policies are those policies that we can implement to prevent users from accidentally or on purpose use email and to leak sensitive information. So we can look into the content of an email and then the direction of the email, where is it going, who is the recipient of the email, and then we can decide, are we going to allow this email based on the content or not? It's basically using those email rules. It's using email rules. It's the same engine. However, the way that we configure this is in something called Microsoft Purview. And the idea behind this is that Microsoft Purview can do a couple of different things. When we think about email, then we have, of course, the mailbox. Inside that mailbox, we have all kinds of items. So we have an email and another email and another email and another email and a calendar item and another calendar item and a task or to-do thingy. And so there's all kinds of content here. And Purview can then go in and basically what Purview is about in the first place. Purview is about data classification, meaning that this will help us to understand our data. It will help us to see what kind of information we are dealing with. And based on the classification, and basically data classification requires us to sort of look at the mailbox in order to see what is in there. And then, well, we have all kinds of rules that would be able to recognize, for example, a credit card number. And it will recognize, for example, a Norwegian passport number, or it will recognize a Norwegian physical address, or a Dutch passport number, or a United States physical address. But many, many things more, like names of diseases, names of medication, the health care related data in general, financial data in general, privacy related data. Now in Europe, we are dealing with the EU and the GDPR regulations, privacy, where we need to be able to recognize personal identifiable information, PII data. So with that, we have all kinds of things we could be looking at this to make sure that we know what kind of data we are dealing. That is the data classification bit. And then we have different kinds of solutions based on how we classify the data. One of them, for example, being something called data life cycle management, basically retention policies. If this is financial data, retain for 10 years. If this is financial data, delete after 10 years. Right? You can keep something from being deleted, or you can force things to be deleted, or both at a certain time. That is data lifecycle management. Another component is something called information protection. Information protection is nice because that is encrypting content and then also managing access to the content. So, for example, if I have a document stored on my computer or in OneDrive or in SharePoint, I can set up I can label the document with a certain classification, and I can say, hey, this is, for example, sensitive information to our organization. Therefore, I'm going to encrypt the content. Plus, I am only going to allow users to access this document if they successfully sign in with the user object in our organization. So I can create a file, put it on a USB drive. I can hand the USB drive over to you, and you will never be able to open it up unless you have an account in my tenant. Or one of the things that is quite nice, what if, for example, in your organization, somebody leaves the organization? So let's say we have a user that is in the organization. The user decides to download a lot of data from SharePoint on a local hard drive, on an offline hard drive, because, hey, we are leaving. So I want to get some information. For next time, my Active Directory user object is going to be disabled or deleted. From that point on, I will not be able to sign in successfully anymore, and therefore I cannot access these documents, because whenever I want to access a document, we're going to check if that user is still alive. Right? So that is an extra thing. And further than that, all content is encrypted. Right? So that is information protection. But when it comes to exchange and security, then what we want to be looking at a lot is something called data loss prevention. And data loss prevention, very often shortened to DLP, is basically making use of these mail rules. And then we can go and say, hey, if an email is being sort of, if we have an outbound email, then we're going to look at the content and we're going to decide whether or not we're going to allow the email to be delivered. That is what data loss prevention is about. One of the cool things is that data loss prevention once started in Exchange online, or in Exchange on-premise actually, and then they also put it in Exchange online. But now, data loss prevention is also something that works for other products than just Exchange as well. So if your users are using Teams, we can even monitor Teams chat messages and see if that message that they are sending is allowed. And if not, it's going to be blocked. Or we also see this in SharePoint and OneDrive for Business. So if you have a file that contains sensitive information and I put it in a team and I invite external people into my team, if I have set up data loss prevention, then the external users will not be able to see what I have in that document that is sensitive for that team. So that is something that data loss prevention is actually quite a nice thing to look at. So yeah. Okay, yeah. Probably, hey, so if you want to learn all about Perview, you need the course is called SC400. Actually, the labs that I'm going to use in this course is also the SC400 labs because it contains Office 365 and Perview. Very useful to look at that, right? So this has all the capabilities. But so if I think about Exchange security, then this is what I think of. There's a lot of things that I'm thinking of. As you can see, it's quite a bit. But hey, if you want to get secure email, if you want to make sure that your email environment is secured, then we need to think about all of these. And that is if we think about defense in depth, we are basically we need to think about the protection in every step of the way, or from a hacker's perspective, what I'm drawing here is pretty much the kill chain as well. The hacker's kill chain is how do I connect from one step to the other? How do I get to what really matters in the end? And that would be that data inside the mailbox.